The power of Auto ISO in Aperture Priority is that it makes shooting daytime street photography a whole lot easier. Let's get into it. In my opinion, Auto ISO is probably the best feature that modern cameras have to offer, especially for street photography. Why? Because it lets you focus on capturing the moment without constantly fiddling with your camera settings. During the daytime, the lighting conditions can change rapidly. One moment you're in bright sunlight, the next you're in shade or in a shadowed alley. Auto ISO handles these variations seamlessly, allowing you to keep shooting without missing a beat. So we're going to take a deep dive into using Auto ISO for daytime street photography. Let's jump right in. Auto ISO automatically adjusts the exposure setting to ensure proper exposure. It allows you to set a minimum and a maximum ISO that you might want to use for your shooting session. Not only this, you can set a minimum shutter speed that you want to work with. For instance, you might pick a shutter speed of 1/250th of a second. So Auto ISO with a minimum shutter speed frees you from manually having to change the ISO and the shutter speed so that you can concentrate on framing interesting compositions and honing your skills at capturing interesting subjects quickly and easily. In this image that was shot at Camden Market, where there's a mixture of uncovered, partially covered and covered areas, here you have an area with a fair bit of dynamic range, tricky bright areas and shadowed areas as well. But because I was using Auto ISO, 100 ISO up to 3200 ISO, the camera recognised that there wasn't enough light and adjusted the ISO up to 2500 in this shot so that the exposure was captured properly. And it does this without me having to change the settings at all. And because it wasn't so dark that the shutter speed needed to drop below the minimum shutter speed of 1/250th of a second, which I will get into later, you can see that the shutter speed is kept at 1/250th of a second. This is why I think Auto ISO is great if you're a beginner or an advanced photographer. If you're just getting started with street photography, using Aperture Priority with Auto ISO will give you a decent balance of being able to easily and speedily capture subjects whilst also giving you creative control of your aperture. This means that you can decide how much of the scene that you want is in focus. Whether it's isolating a subject with a wide aperture or going for an overall softer vibe in your photos, you might pick an aperture of f3.2 to f4. Or maybe you want to keep more of the scene sharp with a smaller aperture, such as f8 for reflections, or even f11 to f14 if you want to capture urban landscape style street shots. Overall, using Aperture Priority with Auto ISO is a time saver, allowing you to react quickly to changing scenes and light conditions without getting bogged down by manual adjustments. When you use Aperture Priority with Auto ISO, capturing subjects becomes even easier. To set up Auto ISO, you simply have to dive into your camera settings, set a minimum lower limit ISO and a maximum upper limit ISO, and also set a minimum shutter speed that you are comfortable with. Now, this is just how I do it on the Ricoh GR3 and the GR3X. Depending upon your camera brand, the Auto ISO menu will be laid out differently. In my opinion, to make the most of Auto ISO during the daytime, set your ISO range between 100 and 3200. This broad range ensures that your camera will adjust to both very bright situations and fairly dim conditions, entering partially covered alleyways or other built-up environments. When it comes to minimum shutter speeds, I like to use 1/250th of a second for my street photography. Why? Because it allows me to convey just a smidgen of blur to the subjects, which I think just adds a little unusual vibe to my photos. And I think that's great for bringing out the hustle and bustle of the streets. But if you're looking to capture subjects more cleanly and sharply, especially if they're moving quickly, you might want to pick a minimum shutter speed of 1/500 seconds. It's great for those moments when you want every detail to be crisp and clear. So with Auto ISO, not only can you work within a specified ISO range that you want to work with on your shoot, but you can also feel safe in the fact that your camera will shoot at a minimum shutter speed that you specifically know will get you the subject freezing results that you are after. However, there is one slight caveat, and I'll get into that soon. In this urban landscape style street shot, I wanted as much depth as possible, as we have this lovely lock that trails off into the distance, but I also wanted to still be able to capture these subjects. So I set my aperture to f11 with a minimum shutter speed of 1/250th of a second. If you look closely, there's a slight blur on my subjects. It's just my personal preference, as I think it adds just a little bit of unusual atmosphere to my photos. Perhaps I watch too many David Lynch movies. I don't know, but that's just me. Quick intermission. If you're enjoying this video, please gently smash that like button. And if you haven't already subscribed yet, please join my crew for more photography setting explorations and composition tips. Your support keeps the magic happening. When using Aperture Priority, Auto ISO works by the camera staying above the minimum shutter speed while it calculates exposure as you walk around and frame shots. When you hit an area where the camera thinks that you need more exposure, it drops to the minimum shutter speed and starts to increase the ISO from the base ISO up to the maximum ISO that you set. The beauty of using Auto ISO with minimum shutter speed is that you don't have to worry about constantly adjusting your ISO or shutter speed. Therefore, it frees you up to focus on capturing that moment, ensuring that your exposure is always balanced even when the light changes. In this shot, the exposure meter has already hit the 1/250 minimum shutter speed that I set, and therefore to get the right exposure, the camera has started to increase the ISO, and to capture this image, the camera calculated that the ISO needed to be at 800. The biggest advantage of using Auto ISO, like with Camden here, is that you can walk around somewhere that you know, like another market or a shopping mall, where there's a mixture of brighter or dark areas, and you can let the camera do the work for you, changing the exposure to meet various conditions within the ISO limits that you have set, so that all you have to do is concentrate on capturing subjects and framing up interesting compositions. It's not just a fantastic way for taking away the need to fiddle with settings during daytime street shooting. Auto ISO also has the unique ability to adapt to darkening conditions. If you find yourself in a particularly dark area and your ISO maxes out to the maximum ISO that you have set, such as 3200, and the camera calculates that there's still not enough light for the exposure, then the camera will start to drop below the minimum shutter speed that you have set. In this shot, the camera has maxed out at 3200, and because there's still not enough light for the exposure, it has thus dropped the shutter speed from the minimum of 1/250th of a second down to 1/50th of a second. It will never go above the maximum ISO that you have set, but it will drop below the minimum shutter speed. But because many cameras these days have in-body image stabilization, and I know I can get sharp shots with my Ricoh cameras at approximately 1/20th of a second, it's not a problem for me if the camera drops below 1/250th of a second. This is why I've stressed in past videos, it's a good idea not just to know your camera settings, but also to know what's the minimum shutter speed that you can take sharp shots with before you get any motion shake. Considering I have a disability where I have to look somewhat ridiculous by keeping my camera on a selfie stick in order to take street photos, and I can still get sharp shots at slow shutter speeds, I don't think you're going to have too much of a problem hand holding your camera steady to get sharp shots in tricky situations either. So, have you had any experience with using Auto ISO? Do you have any other tips or preferences that you would like to share? Please let us know down below. Auto ISO is an invaluable tool for street photographers as it allows you to adapt to changing light conditions effortlessly and focus on what truly matters, capturing the essence of the streets. So jump into Aperture Priority, set your minimum and maximum ISO, choose your minimum shutter speed and hit the streets with confidence. You'll be amazed at just how much easier it is to capture those perfect moments. However, if you want to know how to master shutter speed at night time, then check out this video here. Until we meet again, go forth and create.